Tear is a specific kind of silence that falls over a house during a hellfall. It is not peaceful. It is suffocating. It presses against the windows like a physical weight, dampening the world aside until you feel like you're the only person left. But the scariest part of that silence is not being immune. It is the sudden, creeping religion that you are not. Most of us trust the technology we bring into our homes. We trust the locks, the cameras, and the sensors. But what happens when the device meant to protect your most vulnerable family member becomes it? Something that knows your relative better than you do. Welcome back to Grim Reality Locks. I am the mysterious Nomad. Today, we are opening a lock from a woman named Sarah who lives in a raided farmhouse in Roboted Farmhouse in Roll. This is e-story about the lies we tell ourselves to feel safe, and the moment the truck breaks through the static. If you are listening to this in the dark, check your doors. Part on the false comfort. The winter of 2023 was one of the coldest on record in our county. My husband Mark and I had moved into the farmhouse about 6 months prior, right before his son Leo was born. It was supposed to be our dream home, a trust-free Victorian that sat on 5 acres of land surrounded by dense woods. The stripe of the leaves, the reefs in October, Albert and Lixmiter, Bingle. We were miles from the nearest neighbor. It was romantic in the brochures, but in practice, it was isolating. I was in the thick of what the books call the fourth trimester. The sleep deprivation was not just tiredness, it was a physical fog. My eyes constantly felt like they were filled with sand, and my body etched in place I did not know. Mark was trying his best, but he worked long hours at a logistics firm in the city, often leaving before the sun came up and coming home after it went down. My shift usually fell to me. On this particular Tuesday, a blizzard warning had been effective noon. By midnight, the world outside was gone, replaced by a swirling wall of white. The old house groaned under the wind. Every draft felt like an icy hand reaching under the door frames. I woke up at 2:05 a.m. I know the time exactly because the radius of the alarm clock were the only thing piercing the darkness of our bedroom. Beside me, the bed was empty. The sheets on Mark's side were cold to the touch. I asked him he had gone to the bathroom or maybe down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I rolled over, groaning as my joints popped, fully expecting the baby monitor on my nightstand to light up with lights crying. The monitor was an older audio model we had bought secondhand. We had a fancy video one on our registry, but it broke within a week, so we reverted to this clinky bitch box that looked like to fight a walkie-talkie. Sure enough, the static hissed. The little green LS lights flickered to orange. Yeah, I was fussing. It was that low, rhythmic running sound babies make right before they go into a full-blown scream. I sighed, throwing the heavy duvet off my leg. The air in the bedroom was freezing. We were still trying to figure out the insulation in the upstairs hallway, and the heat never seemed to reach the second floor. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my face, gathering the will to stand up and watch down the hall to the nursery. Then, the static on the monitor spigot. It was a sharp crackle, followed by the distinct sound of the nursery door hinges whining. We had been meaning to oil the door for weeks. It had a habitual squeak that always made me wince, thinking it wake the baby up even more. Throw the speaker. I heard heavy footsteps on the wooden floorboard. Todd, Todd, Todd. I froze, on foot on the floor, listening. She, a voice soothed. It was Mark. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My shoulders dropped 3 inches. He must have hardly a stirring why he was up and gone straight to the rooms I could keep sleeping. It is okay, buddy. Nadie is here. Mark's voice came through the speaker. It sounded thin and slightly distorted by the cheap microphone, but it were Mom. It was safe. The fussing stopped almost immediately. Leo, settle down. I smiled in the dark, pulling their divot back up to my chin. The riot was intoxicating. Here is no greater gift to a new mother than the sound of someone else handling the weight of call. I listened as Mark began to hum. It was a melody he made up, something of key and repetitive that he only used when he was. It was a low, vibrating hum that usually put Leo out in minutes. I lay there, staring in the ceiling, listening to my husband comfort Arson. I felt a surge of gratitude. The house was carried in the storm. The isolation was heavy, but we were in this tighter. He was a good father. He was taking care of us. The humming continued. It was rhythmic, hypnotic. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of the static and the low hum lull me back towards sleep. It must have been 5 or 10 minutes. I was drifting in that space between awake and asleep, feeling warm and secure, but then my throat felt dry. The heating system, why efficient, made the air incredibly arid. I queued lightly. A thirst was sudden and innumerable. I knew I wouldn't be able to fall back into a deep sleep with my throat feeling like sandpaper. I figured I would run downstairs, grab a quick glass of water from the kitchen tap, and be back in bed before Mark finished in the nursery. I wanted to surprise him. Maybe kiss him on the cheek when he came back to bed and thank him for taking the shift. I slipped out of bed, shivering as my bare feet hit the cold hardwood. I grabbed my robe from the hook on the door and wrapped it tight around me. I did not turn on the lamp. I knew the layout of the room by heart, and I did not want to ruin my vision. I tiptoed into the hallway. The wind was howling outside, rattling the loose window pane at the end of the corridor. The floorboards were freezing. As I walked past the nursery door, I paced. The door was closed. I could hear the humming through the wood, muffled and low. Mark was still in there. I didn't want to open the door and risk the light from the hallway disturbing them, so I kept moving toward the stairs. I made my way down the staircase, gripping the banister. The house was pitch black save for the faint bluish glow reflecting off the snow outside the windows. When I reached the bottom landing, I looked toward the kitchen, but something caught my eye in the living room to my left. The living room was illuminated by a flickering blue light. It was the television. I frowned. Mark must have fallen asleep watching TV before coming up to bed and then woken up to check on the baby. But why was the TV still on? I took a few steps into the living room, intending to find the remote and turn it off. My eyes adjusted the dim light. I saw the silhouette of the big leather recliner facing the screen, and I saw a shape in it. I stopped. My heart did a strange flutter, like a bird trapped in a cage. Mark, I whispered. The figure in the chair did not move. I walked closer, the carpet muffling my steps. The television was playing a menu screen on a loop, casting shifting shadows across the room. I walked around to the front of the chair. Mark was there. He was sprawled out, his head tiled back, his mouth slightly open. He was fast asleep. A half-empty beer bottle was sitting on the coaster table beside him. He was wearing his grace weapons and the old Colch hoodie he always wore to Rolex. He was snoring, a soft, rhythmic snore that I had heard 1,000 times. I stood there for a second, my brain refusing to process the information. It was like a math equation that did not balance. If Mark is here. I looked at his chest rising and falling. I reached out and touched his arm. It was warm. He flinched slightly in his sleep but didn't wake. The blood in my veins turned the ice water. The sensation started in my stomach and shot out to my fingertips, making them numb. If Mark is asleep in the recliner, who was in the nursery? My eyes darted to the kitchen counter, which was visible through the open archway. The parent heat of the baby monitor, the second receiver we kept downstairs, was sitting on the granite island. The green power light was on, and from the kitchen, clear as a bell, I heard it. The humming, the exact same off-key rhythmic humming I had been listening to upstairs. The voice that sounded exactly like my husband. I backed away from the recliner, my hands trembling so hard he had to clasp them together. I stared at the kitchen monitor. Suddenly, the humming stopped. Silence filled the downstairs, lighter than the wind outside. "Hen!" The voice on the monitor spoke again. It was the same tone, the same pitch as Mark, but there was no warmth in it anymore. It was flat. "Dad, I think she knows," the voice said. Part 2. The glitch in reality. That sentence hung in the air like toxic smoke. I think she knows. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a terrifying, calm authority. The voice on the baby monitor did not sound like a monster. It did sound like a demon. It sounded actually like a man sleeping 3 feet away from me. It hid his cadence. It had his pitch. It even had a slight leisurely marked drum march when he is exhausted. But Mark was right here, his chest rising and falling in the blue light of the television. For a second, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a delay. Maybe a recording. But technology is not improvise. Technology is not respond to a woman walking downstairs and finding her husband asleep. I did not scream. I think in movies, people scream. In reality, when you're confronted with the loss of your existence, you go silent. You code. I felt like a small animal that had just realized the hawk is already diving. I lunged for Mark. I grabbed his shoulder and shook him hard. My fingernails must have dug into his skin through the hoodie because he jolted awake with a sharp inhale. "What? Sarah?" He blinked, disoriented, his eyes trying to focus on my terrified face. "What is wrong? Is it loud?" I clammed my hand over his mouth. I pressed my palm hard against his lips, shaking my head violently. I put a finger to my own lips, my eyes wide, pleading with him to be quiet. He froze. The confusion in his eyes shifted instantly to alertness. He saw the terror in my expression. He grabbed my wrist, gently pulling my hand away but keeping his voice to a bare whisper. "Sarah, you are shaking," he whispered. "What is it?" Could not speak. I just pointed. I pointed a trembling finger toward the kitchen island, where the baby monitor sat. The green lights on the receiver were pulsing. Mark looked at the monitor, then back at me. He looked confused. "Is he crying?" "Han," the voice spoke again. "She is downstairs, Mark," the voice said. "She is with you." Mark's face went pale. It was a transformation I will never forget. One moment, he was a groggy husband waking up from a nap. The next, he was a man watching his World Cups. He looked at the monitor. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the ceiling toward the nursery. That is my voice," he whispered, the words barely escaping his throat. "I know," I breathed. "What was in town with him?" Mark asked, his voice rising in panic. "Sass, I hasses. They can hear us. They know where we are." Mark scrambled out of the chair. He moved with a sudden, frantic energy. He ran to the fireplace. We kept a heavy, Where did you run fire poker on the hearth? He grabbed it, his knuckles white around the handle. I look around for anything I could use. I grabbed the heavy my life flashlight we kept in the emergency dryer next to the fridge. It was a solid metal baton, heavy and Noel, to break bond. We stood in the kitchen, paralyzed for a split second. The voice on the monitor chained. It stopped mimicking Mark. The fake it dropped. The presence of the lullaby, the soothing fatherly tone it upported. What replaced it whizzing, heavy, wet, raspy breathing. It sounded like someone with light in their lungs, or someone who had been out in the cold for a very long time. It was a jagged animalistic sound right against the microphone. Hoo-woo, hoo-woo, how-woo, and a sound that made my stomach turn, the squeak of wet rubber on the hardwood floor. It was Tay's sound of boots shifting weight. He is right next to the crib, Mark whispered. He was not asking. He was stating the geography of the room we both knew so well. We have to go up there, I said, tears finally spilling over my cheeks. Mark, Lel is in the crib. I know, he said. He looked at the fire poker, then at the stairs. Stay behind me. Diana make a sound. Part 3. The ascent. The staircase in our farmhouse is original to the building. It is narrow, steep, and made of hardwood that has walked over 100 years. Every third step has a distinct grain. We had learned to navigate it at night while waking the baby, stepping on the edges where the wood was supported by the beams, but yelling it now, with adrenaline floating our veins, felt impossible. Mark went first. He held the poker raised like a baseball bat. I followed right on his heels, gripping the flashlight with both hands, my thumb hovering over the button. The house was so quiet. The wind outside it momentarily died down, leaving a vacuum of silence that amplified everything. Creak. Moss boot land on the third step. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the stairwell. We froze. From the kitchen monitor below us, the raspy breathing stopped. That silence. I held my breath. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a hushing sound that drowned out everything else. Had the enchanter heard us? We waited 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Then, from the monitor, a new sound. Tap, dab, tap. Someone was taping a fingernail against the plastic casing of the baby yen at the nursery. It was a timed, a rhythmic, deliberate signal that they were waiting. Mark's jaw tightened. He didn't care about being quiet anymore. He took the steps to wait a ton, moving fast. I scrambled after him. We reached the upstairs landing. The hallway was a tumult of darkness. The only light came from the nightlight in the mailroom at the far end, casting long, distant shadows ahead of me. The nursery door was at the center of the hall. It was closed. I stopped. Mark, I whispered. I left it open. When I went to bed, it was ajar. Mark stared at the closed door. A thin line of darkness separated the wood from the frame. We crept closer. The air in the hallway felt colder than usual. A distinct draft was blowing from somewhere, chilling the sweat on the back of my neck. It smelled like wet wool and old dirt. Mark positioned himself in front of the door. He looked back at me, his eyes wide wild. He mouthed the count. 1, 2, 3. He kicked a door right below the handle. The wood splintered. The door swung open, banging hard against the inner wall. Mark rushed in, swinging the poker, shouting a primal, guttural roar to scare a fanatiker. Get away from him, he screamed. I clicked the flashlight on, sweeping the beam across the room. The beam cut through the darkness. It hit the changing table, empty. It hit the rocking chair, empty, but rocking slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. And the beam hit the crib. My heart stopped. The crib was empty. The mattress was bare. The blanket was gone. Leo was gone. No, I screamed, the sauter out of my throat, raw and painful. He took him. Mark, he took him. Mark was spinning around the room, checking the closet, checking behind the door. But then, the beam of my flashlight caught something. The window, the nursery window, which was on the second floor, wide open. The curtains were billowing violently into the room, carried by the snowstorm outside. Snow had piled on the sill and was drifting onto the floor. The window, I melt. Mark ran to it. He leaned out into the storm, the wind whipping his hair, but I looked down. Here, underneath the crib, tucked into the far corner against the wall, was a bundle. It was not a blanket way on. It was a filthy, oversized flannel jacket smelling of grease and pine needles. It was wrapped tight, like a cocoon, and inside it, something moved. Mark, I dropped to my knees. I reached for the bundle. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the fabric. I pulled it toward me. It was warm. I peeled back the dirty collar of the jacket. Lel was inside. He wide awake, his big eyes staring up at me in the flashlight beam. He was perfectly silent, staring at me with a strange, unnatural calmness. I scooped him up, clutching him to my chest, sobbing into his neck. He was cold, but he was alive. I found him. Mark, I found him, he cried. Mark pulled his head back in from the window. He looked at us, real of washing over his face, but his eyes were still fixed on the window. Sarah, has said, his voice trembling. Come look at this. I stood up, holding Leo tight, shielding his face from the cold draft. I walked to the window and looked out where Mark was pointing. The nursery window opened onto the roof of the front porch. It was a flat, snowy surface, and there, fresh in the snow, were footprints, heavy boot prints. Hey ladder, from the edge of the roof, toward the window, not away, Howard. And next to the footprints, dredged through the snow, were marks that looked like fingers. He did not jump, Mark whispered. Backing away from the window, he climbed up, and hey, Mark stopped, hashing on the flashlight above the window leading up to the attic vent. The siding of the house was torn away. A dark, gaping hole had been cut into the wood, big enough for a man to squeeze through. The footprints on the roof didn't lead away into the night. They circled back and disappeared up the side of the house toward the attic. The realizing hit us both that this the same time. The humming, the knowledge of Arlau, the perfect mimicry of Mark's voice. He had not just broken in tights. He had been living in the walls, a buff ass, watching pass, listening to us, practicing our voice, waiting for the storm to cover the sound of his descent. And the worst part, when we kicked the door in, the room was empty, but the rocking chair was moving, and the window was open. But the tracks led up. He was not gone. He was still here. Part 4. The open window. The realization that the predator was obvious, not gone, triggered a primal flight response that I cannot fully describe. It was not a decision. It was an instinct. Mark grabbed my arm, his grip rosingly tight. Had to not say a word. He did not need to. We both knew that the ceiling above our heads was no longer a barrier, it was a thin layer of plaster separating a flat readiness. We ran. I clutched at Lau so hard against my chest I was afraid I would hurt him. But I did not loosen my grip. We scrambled down the hallway, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. I expected a hand to reach down from the attic hatch. I expected the drywall to burst open. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep right behind us. We brusquely fell down the stairs, ignoring the groan of the third step. Ignoring the cold, we burst into the kitchen, grabbed the car keys from the hook, and ran out the back door into the blizzard. The wind hit us like a physical blow. The snow was blinding, stinging my face, but the cold felt better than the stagnant warm air at that house. We threw ourselves as if to the chalk. Mark jammed the key in the ignition, his hands shaking so violently he missed the slot twice. As the engine rayed to life and the headlights cut through the soaring white, I looked back at the house one last time. The nursery window was still open. The curtains were flapping like surrender flags, and for a split second, in the dark square of the attic vent above it, I thought I saw a face. Hell! Again, watching us leave, we drove to the nearest police station, which was 20 minutes away. We did not speak the entire ride. Lel slept through it, wrapped in filthy flannel jacket that smelled of stale tobacco and unwashed skin. When the police arrived the farmhouse an hour later, they went in with guns drawn and tiniest. We waited in the station lobby, drinking turtle coffee, jumping at every phone that rang. At 4 a.m. the sheriff came out to talk to us. They did not find the man. The storm had covered its tracks on the roof almost instantly, and the woods behind our house were vast and dense. He had vanished into the wild. But they found where Hade had been lying. In the crawl space above the nursery, tucked between the insulation the chimney breast, was a nest. It was a makeshift living space lined with stolen twigs from our line and closet and insulation foam. He found empty wrappers of food from our pantry, granola bars, cans of soap, bottles of water. He had been coming down to our house while we slept or while we were at work eating our food and using our bathroom. But that was not the worst part. The sheriff blazed a clear plastic evidence back on the table in front of us. Inside was a small, battery-operated digital voice recorder. We found this next to his sleeping bag. The sheriff said quietly, "You might not want to listen to it." Mark insisted. The recording was hours long. It was mostly static, but every few minutes it would capture audio. I was asked. It was recordings of our conversations in the kitchen, arguments about money, me singing to Lair, Mark talking on the phone to his boss, and then there were the practice sessions. On the tape, we heard a raspy, unfamiliar voice. It would play a snippet of Mark saying something like, "Hey buddy, it is okay. Pan." The voice would repeat it over and over again, adjusting the pitch, softening the gravel. Hey, buddy, Daddy is here." He had been practicing some Mark's voice for weeks. He was not living with us, he was studying us. He was learning to be calmest. And the reason Lau was not crying when we heard the monitor, the reason he was tucked under the crib, the police found a small drawer hole in the ceiling of the nursery directly above the crack. He had been watching Lau every night, and that night, when it came down through the window, he did not intend to hurt the baby. The flannel jacket Lau was wrapped in was warm on the inside. The intruder had been holding him. He had been rocking him in the chair, humming the lullaby, playing house with my son while my husband slept downstairs. When he heard us coming up the stairs, he hit Lau under the crotch to prohibitive him from us, or maybe to come back for him later. We never spent a night in the house. We moved into a condo in the city, on the 10th floor, with 24-hour security and no attic. But sometimes, late at night, when the city noise down and the silence settles in, I stare at the new baby monitor. It is a top-of-line video model with encryption, but every now and then, the signal flickers. The screen goes static for a fraction of a second, and I wonder if he is still out there in the woods, humming that lullaby to the cold wind, waiting for her family to let their guard down. This log is closed. Security is an illusion we purchased to help you sleep. We believe that locks keep people out, but we forget that houses are porous. We forget that walls are hollow. And we forget that the most dangerous things are not the monsters under the bed, people who are people who are patient about to wait and tell you to rate and fight them. If you want to keep these locks open, leave a like and subscribe to Grim Remelet's Locks. Let me know in the comments which story kept you up tonight. Stay safe.